Hi everybody, and welcome to another live stream. I've actually lost count. I think this is number 23 all told. Great to see so many people already here in the chat, leaving lots of questions. Just a reminder that the entire contents of this live stream, except for one or two things I want to say at the beginning, is driven by people who are here live. So all the questions coming in, remember, leave questions or topics or comments, and I'll cover those. If you're watching this after which, and loads of people do that, then of course, if there's questions that you're not interested in, just keep skipping forwards. And it's great that so many people actually watch this afterwards. So it's great to see lots of the regular people in here, so that's fantastic you're joining. So what I thought I would do is I went back and had a look at questions from last week that I didn't get to cover, but I think we will cover those in some form or fashion today. But I thought before we start with all the questions, because there's a lot coming in, I just want to raise two quick three quick things. First of all, I should probably introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gary Bembridge. The channel is Tips for Travelers, and the goal of the channel is to help make it more fun and easy to discover, find, and have those dream cruise vacations that we're all looking for. Two big pieces of news that I thought I'd touch on very briefly, which a lot of people probably have seen. The first of which is, and you won't be able to read this, but I have put a link down in the notes that you can go to afterwards, but you can just see me waving my hands underneath there. But the UK government has put out the first round of advice and guidance around the opening of cruising. Very importantly, that after the 17th of May, when cruises start, they can operate with 1,000 people or 50% capacity, whichever is the lower. Really important, though, that after the 21st of June, which is roadmap step 4, they're hoping to remove all of that capacity. However, that's not guaranteed yet, but certainly the cruise lines, most of them, I think other than MSC and maybe one other, are all only selling after the 21st of June, because I'm guessing they're expecting that. The other important thing, that those cruises that start after the 17th of May, of which MSC is one, and they were only selling for 1,000 people, by the way, up until June, is inside groups of no more than 6 people or 2 households will not be allowed to mix indoors on those particular cruises. So the first kind of piece of advice has come out. Also, really importantly, though, they're only lifting the advice for domestic cruises. So anyone that was hoping to fly perhaps to a country, Italy or wherever, to join an MSC cruise or one of those that start, at this point in time, the advice is against all forms of international cruising. So that, of course, means the Foreign Office hasn't lifted its advice. It means you're not covered by insurance. The second thing I wanted to, I'm sure we might come back to that, but a lot of people have been getting really wound up about, or talking about, there's only 1,000 people allowed, and that is only up until the 21st of June when that will change. Of course, we don't know the numbers yet, but the idea is that after that, a lot of that will be lifted. The other thing that I wanted to do, which is, in fact, someone had asked a question around Disney. Disney overnight, I think it was overnight anyway, they've posted their requirements for UK cruising. And again, you won't be able to read this unless you've got phenomenal Superman eyesight, but again, I've put the link down below. A couple of key things that they've said. In fact, it's probably so small, it's probably not even worth showing you. But a couple of things that they've said is, Disney have announced that they will be requiring vaccines for everyone over the age of 18 on the domestic UK cruises. Everyone under the age of 18 will have to have a negative PCR test, and they're offering a provider which will do it at a lower cost or at a more attractive cost. You don't have to use it. The pre-boarding tests, the antigen tests, that will be included in the fare. And they make some other sort of allusions to various different protocols and ongoing testing ongoing screening during the cruise, but not being very specific. One thing that was particularly interesting for those of you in the UK, and it links to the 7-day rule, which we've seen some cruise lines have, is Disney specifically talking their protocols about the passenger locator form. Now, for those of you who are not in the UK, the passenger locator form is a document that everyone coming into the UK has to complete. And that document is about where you're going to be staying. It also is now linked to a series of tests that you have to have. So when you come into the UK, there's red countries where you have to go into hotel quarantining. There's amber countries, which we don't know what they are yet, because travel is illegal till the middle of May. That you do home quarantine, which you have to do 2 tests. You have to commit to doing 2 tests. And then there's green countries which also have testing. But interesting, the passenger locator form, the first cruise line to mention it. So what does that mean? We don't yet know. So that's a quick jog through some of the new news. So I'll go back and get into the questions topics. So great to see us, that people like Hetty and Lou and Sarah, etc. here, and I probably missed a few others, but I'll go through those. So let's pick up on a couple of the questions that were posted. So Eddie said, can you say why Carnival in Australia will not accept P&O or Princess into their loyalty program? It works the other way. Also, can you give an update on cruises in Australia? Well, it's very interesting. I didn't know that it was the other way around, but what's very interesting when it comes to cruise loyalty programs is the different cruise line groups have a different approach. So if you take a look, for example, at the Carnival Corporation group, of which you're referring to, is certainly based in the UK and what I've seen in the US, and it sounds like slightly different in Australia, is each individual program is to that specific line only. So if you've got, for example, I've got diamond status on Cunard, but on Princess I'm in whatever the lowest level is, Ruby or something. And on P&O, I'm cruising on P&O, I'm in whatever their lowest level is, and you don't get any matching at all. So it's not a surprise that you're seeing that in Australia. That's interesting. You're suggesting that there is some movement, but certainly the Carnival group tend not to let you kind of match your loyalty. When you talk about Royal Caribbean group, they do have more of their points which you accumulate. I think it's called the Captain Circle. Am I getting confused with Princess? But anyway, whatever their policy is, you build up points which appear to be more movable for perks across the different lines. And then Norwegian, I seem to remember, they're very separate. So the norm, it's very different and varies. What's interesting though is lines like MSC Cruises have started a matching thing. So if you're diamond level, say in Cunard, if you go on an MSC cruise and you can show proof of that, they will put you on their equivalent. So that's quite attractive. So I don't know why that's the situation with Carnival not accepting P&O and Princess vice versa, but for the Carnival group, it's normal to do that. So it's quite interesting if you're ever thinking about getting into a cruise loyalty program, is thinking about, do you want one that's going to incorporate different lines or not different lines? In terms of cruises in Australia, it's very interesting because I was trying to find that out as well recently because it's gone very, very quiet. As we know, there is this ban on cruise ships pretty much. I guess it's winter now there anyway. I did see some news that I think it was P&O had cancelled some more cruises quite a way through into the year, but it wasn't a kind of a blanket cruise. I guess what we're waiting for is a ruling by the Australian government about whether they're going to accept cruises or not accepting cruises. And I can't remember the exact date that cruises are certainly banned. Cruise ships are banned from entering Australian waters. It's certainly, from the outside, it looks like Australia's taking a pretty kind of a no COVID, a strict approach. And I guess the flare-ups that happened in Perth this weekend with people catching COVID in some of the hotels is spooked everybody. And so I suspect we're going to see a very slow progress, but I don't have any specifics on that, and I'm certainly keeping an eye on it. I think we're due for an update quite soon. And even Clear Australia's gone very, very quiet on that whole piece. Stan NYCK, I'm guessing that might be right. If it's not, it's Stan Yank. Anyway, we're hoping our transatlantic will go this fall. I know you can't say for sure, but do you think the 4 transatlantic cruises will come back to the United States or at the great risk of cancellation? That is, you're right, it's very hard to answer, and it's really going to depend on how many ships move from where they are at the moment to Europe for the European season and what sort of season it's going to be, because obviously there will be no transatlantics if the ships are still in the Caribbean. So there's a couple of ships still to move. So for example, even some of the ships that are on the domestic UK cruising are still across Caribbean ways. So for example, if I look at the Celebrity, where are we now? Celebrity Silhouette, that's the one that's coming across. When I last looked, it was still in Barbados. I guess that's one of the places they pick up crew. So there are certain ships moving across. We know Apex is moving across. We know Anthem of the Seas is going to be here. We know Celebrity Silhouette, those sort of ships. So any of the ships that get moved across here will, of course, have to go back across the Atlantic. But there's very few of those big cruise line groups are moving their ships actually across this way, because it's basically, other than the UK domestic cruises, which we know are happening. I think there's about 14 lines now. We know in Greece, of course, we've got a couple of lines with Celebrity Apex, Seabourn, Silver Sea. We've got a couple out of Cyprus. Also, we've got Norwegian out. So they're moving ships across. So the transatlantic season will only happen based on how many ships move. So what I would recommend is I'm not sure what ship you're on, but I would keep an eye on where the ship is. And one of the ways of doing that is one of the apps is called, it's a free app called Marine Traffic. And just keep an eye on that ship and if it's moved, because if it isn't budging towards Europe or Europe isn't opening for cruising. And certainly we haven't seen any real movement in Europe on cruising. Spain has made no movement, so that's not opening. Italy is very much restricted to a few lines at the moment. We know there's big challenges in France, in Netherlands, in other places like that. So it's really hard to say, and we don't really know what's really happening with European cruises at all. So that's definitely something to watch. Anthony was asking, now one of the things I think people picked up here is, in my various videos, and I think we've spoken about here, is one of the critical things to do once you've booked a cruise is keep an eye on the pricing to see how it's moving, particularly if you're booking far in advance. And I had said that one of the things that I use is Cruise Watch. Now, what a couple of people have pointed out is, first of all, they tend to do those in US dollars, which is fine, because if you see the movement, you can check back in local. But also, they don't actually cover a number of the UK lines because it's pretty US-centric. So with something like P&O, what I would recommend you do is perhaps take a look and use the Cruise Critic option. So what Cruise Critic do is, it's a slightly different process. But if you go into Cruise Critic and you search a particular cruise, whatever that is, P&O, wherever, the Med or whatever it is. And then it gives you the option, once you've searched that, it gives you pricing, because obviously they're trying to sell cruises and I guess a net commission. But it then gives you the option to track the prices. So that might be one thing to certainly do, to look, because you can certainly track P&O cruises. So that would be my recommendation. I do have a couple of other sites that I know of that I haven't used as much. And after this, I'll put those in there. But I would say probably Cruise Critic is the best one. So hypnotherapy there, I think hopefully if you were live at the beginning, you've got the answer on the Disney question. Stan also asking, it's 5 p.m. in the UK, is a cocktail hour yet? If you are in the UK or wherever you are, it is. My cocktail of choice, of course, is tea. So pretty wild. And as I always mentioned, I do keep an eye. I will be keeping an eye on the iPad flow as well, because this either often moves much quicker and I get more questions than I do get up on the program. And I can really see there's a couple there. In fact, I've just also seen Daniel K has just left a super chat, which is very kind of you. Thank you very much, Daniel. So the JM129, regular, great to see you here. Usually articles about solo cruising emphasizes lines who have solo cabins or low supplements. Which lines do you like for solo cruises, reasons other than those two? Great question, actually, because also I've had lots and lots of requests to do an updated video on solo cruising. So I'm starting to think around that, and that's a good angle to also, it's good inspiration for that, because you're right, most people will tend to focus on ships or lines that have solo cabins, which aren't always necessarily great. So for example, you've got Norwegian with their solo area, but it's all inside cabins. So that, for example, wouldn't appeal to me at all. And then you've got Saga, which they do have very nice cabins, beautiful ships, but it's pretty expensive. And in fact, sometimes you need to make sure that sometimes you might even be able to get a normal cabin for the same price, because it's quite big. So in terms of solo cruising reasons than the other two, I look at it in two ways. So I do often start on the basis of where do I want to go and what cruise line do I want to go on. Now, obviously, I'm probably a little bit not entirely atypical, because often I'm looking with an eye both what do I want to do, but also what I want to cover for the channel. So it's a bit unusual, I guess, from that perspective. But what I do focus on is where do I want to go and what line do I want to go? And then I try and figure out, okay, so I really want to go on Oceania, for example, which I love. And I think you do as well. And so if I want to go to the Caribbean, I think I want to go on a small ship. So then I will basically try and work out what is the best price I can do. I'll keep an eye out then on sites like Vacations to Go. They have a solo area where they look at deals. I'll also look at another one in the UK called Passion for Cruises, and just see if there's anything sort of happening on deals. Keep an eye on the sort of email newsletters, try and go a little bit out of season. But I do really focus on those, that approach. So for example, I almost just accept in the way I'm going to pay premium. So for these UK domestic cruises, on all of them, as Sarah will know, and she's in the chat areas, all of those cruises we've had to book, or we have booked, basically paying almost double. So in fact, my partner's coming on one of them and it's costing me the same, basically. I think you saved a lot of tax. So a lot of it's driven by what I really, really want to do. But I do try and plan on those bigger, those big trips where I want to make sure I'm in a really good cabin, plan really far ahead. So if I want to go on like a Silver Sea or something like that, they do offer a Ponant, for example, which I'm doing my Antarctica trip with. And when I do my Silver Sea one is, I plan those really far out in advance. And I know, because I know that they promote certain solo cruises, and then I book on those specific cruises. Other ones I will go down a grade of cabin. So for example, I'm not doing one of the Disney ones because I've run out of time, but I'm going to do a Disney one next year. So I've probably got on a slightly lower cabin than I would like to have done, or a different sort of lower grade of balcony, because I would like a balcony that's going to the Norwegian fjords, but slightly lower. So try and kind of marry that out. So not sure if that's quite answered there, but I'll try and spend more time crafting that for that specific video. Thomas is asking, is there any progress on the universal COVID passport scheme? There isn't a lot. There is no is the short answer, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and we've seen lots of kind of movement around the place. So we've got IATA, which is pushing their particular solution. We've seen the EU, of course, have their green COVID certificate heading along its way. We've got some countries who are actually pushing that even earlier. So France, for example, just this past week have spoken about trying to open to vaccinated Americans and other countries quicker using some kind of an early form of the EU passport. But there isn't anyone, but there is definitely a lot going on behind the scenes. But the timing, most people are saying, even in countries that are pushing it quite aggressively, like the UK, we know is working very hard at it. Countries like Greece are working very hard at it, but they're really talking June, July into the summer. So that there isn't. One of the complications is the World Health Organization is advising against vaccine passports. But I think what's important is, and it's interesting how you've named it, what the government certainly here is trying to get people to shift away from calling it a vaccine passport into some kind of COVID certification, which has vaccines or recent negative tests, or that you have the antibodies from recovering. But I think we're going to see much more progress on that, because I think there's a general recognition that international travel is not going to open without it. We're seeing it, a whole lot of countries in the Caribbean have spoken, they've changed their rulings based on vaccinated passengers coming in. So Barbados, for example, now if you go in with and you're vaccinated, you still have to do the test before you go test at the airport, but you don't have to be doing the quarantining in your hotel once you get the results and stuff like that. So we're seeing a lot of movement on that. Nigel, this is a good one. I've also been thinking about this and I haven't quite got around to it, but I'm also thinking this might be a good topic to do as a video as well, is the whole area of this packing challenge, particularly because a lot of us will be out of practice. But Nigel's saying, hope all is well. Yes, absolutely. Even better, because I had my second vaccine on Thursday. So now I'm fully vaccinated, which is also nice. That's cheered me up. What on earth to pack for a 4-day staycation around the UK? Any advice? One of the things that I will do, I'll actually do a much more detailed video and perhaps article around this, because I am thinking around that whole thing around getting my head around it. And also one of the tactics is, do you want to take a suitcase, or do you want to try and do it as a carry-on? So often you'll find on those short 2 or 3 nighters that I've been on, we would normally take carry-on. So, because also you have the advantage of self-disembarkation. Now, we don't really know what the process for disembarkation is going to be. I'm suspecting it's going to be a much more controlled experience, because they're not going to want to have, like you normally have, is everybody rammed into the foyer trying to get off the ship at the same time. I'm assuming they're going to be trying to manage that much more. So, it may be a much slower process. But I think one of the things that depends a lot is, first of all, that decision. The second decision, I think, is going to be around dress codes. And what we haven't seen, I was actually looking at my my planner for all the different cruises that I've got booked, and none of them actually have dress code stuff in them yet. So I would know normally Cunard, for example, would normally have formal nights. Pinot would normally have formal nights. You know, they're pretty strict. Saga, which I'm also on, would have formal nights. So it's getting a sense around what the dress codes are, because that will also determine kind of the volume of the size and how formal they are. So I think one of the key questions would be, you know, literally decide the size you want to take. Secondly, look a lot around dress codes. Are you going to have to take a suit, or are you going to want to take, you know, a tuxedo, and your wife, you know, her glitzy diamante outfits? You know, so that's one area. The other thing I would say is clearly in the UK, even though it's August, September time, layers. So that's the one thing I'm thinking about around, is basically around that whole classic layer system would be really key. And I also think that the problem with packing, particularly if you want to take little as least amount of luggage, and it's a challenge, is around shoes. So I'll tell you what, it's easier for a man, I think. But my strategy when I go on these short cruises is I basically take 3 shoes, obviously 3 pairs of shoes. I'll take a smartish pair, which I wear to board the ship, which I can then use in the evenings. So whatever that is, one that you can, you know, it's not so smart that you can't wear around the ship in the day, but it's smart enough to wear at night. Some sort of other closed, more casual shoe like trainers. Now that helps then if you want to exercise, go walking on the deck, or of course, if there are ports of call, you can use those on excursions. Then some kind of flip-floppy kind of stuff, which is great for if you just on sea days for padding around the ship. The other thing I would say though is think a lot around taking all your toiletries and all that kind of stuff, because if you leave that stuff behind, it's very expensive to buy on the ship. And although we know that it appears that the shops will be open, kind of make sure you're covered on that, you know, your normal lotions and potions, your headache pills, your seasick pills, and all that kind of stuff. But I will do a much more detailed piece around the fact I was kind of working on that. I was actually working on the idea of how can you go on a cruise and basically take hand luggage. So that's a great tip, and it's good to see that question. I will pick up that. Sarah, just responding to a question, Sarah, I think I mentioned before, is the travel agent that I work with, and Lou had asked the question around, you know, how busy are people with these UK seacations, as they're called, and certainly it does seem pretty busy. So that's good to know that it's busy. And someone had asked a question which I just zoomed through. I saw something about Greece. Okay, so let me touch on Marella. So it's interesting, Marella, that was the 2 that hadn't really, the 3 cruise lines that hadn't really come out on the vaccinated side that we were waiting for. Disney is now confirmed. Marella, you're right. If you look at the Marella write-up, it's pretty vague. They haven't said whether you do or they haven't said whether you don't. So I think we will get some more clarity around that. And the same with Fred Olsen, which they talk about vaccines being part of a layered process, but they haven't actually made a ruling. And what they have said, their MD has said in various interviews, is they will go based on final government advice. So I think we might see some direction there, but no, we haven't seen anything explicit. And I've read their site a couple of times, and it's a bit like the Disney site. Now they said it, you would or wouldn't. So, you know, so that's definitely one. So Tom has become a YouTube channel member. That's great. Thank you very much for becoming a channel member. Johnny, before my Cunard crossing was cancelled, my partner said she didn't want to go. In such a case, what would happen if I showed up alone, and what about on-board credits? So this is, I'll tell you what my understanding is, and if it's different, Sarah or something can pop it in. The critical thing is more, certainly historically, has been if you try and change a passenger. And I have seen before, certainly before the pandemic, on certain cruise lines, and I'm not 100% sure if it was Cunard, is sometimes a change of passenger name was often almost treated as a cancellation on some lines. So that could be quite a complicated process. I think if you arrived without somebody, that's probably going to be less of an issue because they can take it off the manifest. It would probably be advisable to let them know. You're certainly not going to get a lower fare. You might get a little bit of refund on the taxes, as I was mentioning earlier. If on most of those cruises, when I was looking at the price, Sarah was doing the price for me, we were saying, okay, if I was doing this as double occupancy, it would say 100. If I was doing a single occupancy, it was basically 97 or something. So there's a small movement. So you may or may not be able to get that. However, because it's after the 90 days, you may not even be able to get that back. In terms of onboard credits, now, when I've booked, I think I'm right in saying in Cunard, the onboard credit is allocated per person. So I'm not 100% sure, but if Sarah knows the answer, it'd be good to get that. But certainly on other cruises I've booked on, where I've gone solo, but effectively paid twice. So for example, Oceania, all those perks were per cabin. But I think I'm right in saying on Cunard, it's per person. When you get your statement, you'll see it's got, Johnny the Kanak, fare such and such, onboard credit $500, Mrs. Johnny Kanak, blah, blah, blah. So you may lose those credits. But if someone knows that specifically, but I think it's okay in terms, it is definitely okay in terms of the boarding side. I'll answer this question. I do get a lot of cruise questions. Kamal asking, can you elaborate when Royal Caribbean will take waiters to work on the ship? Thank you. So Kamal, certainly all the cruise lines, or many of the cruise lines, are starting to recruit staff. I have followed some of those. I know Royal Caribbean are recruiting for certain ships. So they are taking back for those ships that are coming in service. Of course, there's very, very few of those. So I've also seen others posting where they've originally received notification they were going to be recalled, and that's been cancelled. So I think it's really much going to be in relation to when cruising gets going again, and where you are in that whole roster period. So, and of course, the big question is, when is it going to start in the US? And we just don't know. In the US, it doesn't seem to be making much progress since all these lawsuits and everything going on. So Sonia asking, are there any options for US citizens who frankly just want to cruise? Are they allowing US citizens to fly to the UK to cruise? Super frustrating. Love your channel, Gary, and all the information. So Sonia, a little bit complicated, but let's go. So I'll answer the UK question first, and then I'll come back to what your options are. So US citizens, only residents of the UK can join the UK cruises, certainly through until the September time. So you have to be a UK resident, which means you have to be in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. And I think I'm right in saying, because I did see in the Disney, that because of the area, I think other parts of Ireland may be able to join, because the UK has a sort of common travel area with Ireland. But no other person can join. Now, certainly if you're coming from the US into the UK at the moment, it's separate to cruising, because you won't be able to cruise. But coming to the UK, you would have to go into 10 days quarantining, and you would have to have 3 COVID tests, 1 before you arrive, 1 just after you arrive, and 1 5 days in. So you'd have to do the quarantining anyway. And it's similar across Europe. So that is definitely not an option. If you want to go cruising, say out of Italy, that's also not an option. That's only available to EU residents. You could, though, go into Greece or Cyprus, because they are looking to allow US citizens to come in, though there's still some restrictions on travel at the moment from the EU, US citizens coming in. So, but you should, by the time cruises start, for example, be able to go on the Greek cruises or the Cyprus cruises. Of course, you need to be absolutely sure and make sure you've got flexibility, because those restrictions would have to be finally lifted, and I think the view is they would be. Of course, the other option is those cruises that are set up in the Caribbean and surrounding area. So your Bahamas cruises like Crystal and so on. You've got St. Martin with Celebrity. You've got Antigua. Those ones that have, and Bermuda as well. So you've got those kind of options. Now, what I've seen a lot of US citizens pointing out is it's pretty expensive. Like the flights and things are pretty expensive. As we also know, the US has just issued this week, the CDC, no, it wasn't CDC, I guess it was using the CDC advice, has also shifted most of those countries, including the UK, into level 4, which is do not travel. So theoretically, I guess you can't even travel into some of these, including those countries where cruising is started now. That, of course, may get lifted. Certainly, if you're coming from the UK, or if you're traveling from the UK on that level, most people would not do that because you have no travel insurance, and actually tapping in if there's any issues that you have into the embassies is more of a challenge if you're traveling against Foreign Office advice. It seems less strict with the US. It seems more of an advice. So your limits, your options, Sonia, are pretty limited, with lots of question marks and expense, basically expense around them. See, Emma's joined. Emma Cruises has joined. I missed that there, and also Cruise Monkeys, a newly rebranded Cruise Monkey, are here. Gavin and Luke, they've just rebranded Cruise Monkeys with a funky new logo. So they've got entertainment crew joining Iona during the first week of May. As you mentioned before, like it takes up to 12 weeks for remanning some of these ships. So good insight that they're starting to enter. So Sarah's saying, to that question about Cunard, you're right to be no-show in terms of onboard credit and no-show. You will not get a refund and fare. Always best to cancel in advance. One of the important questions, tea of choice. A tea of choice is actually called rooibos or red bush. It's South African, I guess originated in South Africa. It's a decaf kind of thing. So that's my favorite tea. And sweet tea is the only real tea. I haven't without sugar. I'm sweet enough as it is. So KB in the UK, we're thinking about the Royal Caribbean cruise out of Cyprus, but isn't that country on the red list? Well, at the moment, we don't know, I guess, what is going to be on the red list and what's not going to be on the red list. I suspect from all the noises they're making, if you look at the criteria, so just to explain to people if they don't know this, what the UK said is when travel is going to be allowed from the 17th of May, which is when domestic cruising can also start, and when international travel is no longer illegal, they introduce a red, amber, and green country, and that really determines around your form quarantining when you come back. And the criteria is based on vaccination levels, COVID levels, actual incidence of COVID, hospitalizations, that kind of stuff, and also variants, which is their big concern. Now, what the view is, certainly, and I was reading some in the paper yesterday, one of the analysts who's been analyzing the criteria thinks that probably most of Europe is going to be an amber country, which means when you come back from those countries, you will have to have the 3 COVID tests and quarantine at home for 10 days afterwards. I'm not sure it will necessarily be a red country as such, but I think the view is it's going to be more amber. The only ones they were talking about that they think might hit the criteria, they're talking about Malta and obviously the US, Australia, New Zealand, places you can't travel to. And there was 1 or 2 other countries. There was some hope that maybe the Greek islands and maybe the Canary Islands, but we won't know that until early May. So certainly if you're looking at booking those, KB is, you have to bear in mind you may be quarantining. You also need to bear in mind that you have to assume that the advice against international cruising is lifted, because obviously otherwise you won't be able to get travel insurance. That you can theoretically buy very specialist travel insurance, which is pretty expensive. So it's one of those things, is I guess if you want to take the punt on it, but just make sure whatever you do is really, 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 really flexible. So Lou's saying US citizens are okay going to Greece, so we booked the new celebrity Apex Simpson. I think also what's the key, I would say, is like Lou's saying, is pushing it as late as you possibly can is also the key, because by the time, I think what the EU is now saying, I saw yesterday, they're hoping that they will have enough vaccine supply to have had it, most of their adult population have at least had their first vaccine by July. So that's starting to accelerate now. If you look at the UK, just saw today, now in the UK, I think they're now saying half of the entire population, so that includes kids, everybody, has been vaccinated now. I think it's something like 60 or something % of the adult population. Across in Europe, it varies between 11 and 20% at the moment, but picking up. So so pushing it a little bit later is key. Thomas, I don't know if the question, maybe it's come up or not. We did answer, but I'll do it again. But If you're a solo traveler who's paid for a partner, you won't get their shipboard credits. No, and the exception is, though, which I've seen, for example, and I've seen it a little bit. So if you take a look at, say, Virgin Voyages, for example, they have a price. If you look at their advertising and promotion, they have a price per cabin. So, and they do have solo cabins as well. But they, but if you want to go in one of the bigger cabins or suites or whatever, they have a price per cabin. And what appears to happen there is you have an onboard credit for the cabin. So, for example, my Virgin Voyages trip that I booked later into next year, I haven't booked one of these UK ones because I ran out of time, didn't have a time slot to do it. But certainly I've got the same onboard credit as if I was going with my partner because it's per cabin. On Oceania as well, their packages are all per cabin. So, for example, on Oceania, you get, depending on if you're booking, you get O-Life. So you might get, say, 12 excursions included, but that's per cabin. So as a solo traveler, that's great because you have 12 excursions. If you're traveling with someone, that's basically 6 excursions if both of you are going on. So it does differ a little bit by cruise line. So that's the key, I think, when you're booking, is asking the question, or if you're checking is the onboard credit allocated per named booking or is it per cabin? And it certainly it differs. I found that on a couple of lines where it's different. And I'm trying to think some of the other ones I've booked as well. I've got chunks of onboard credit which were kind of for the cabin. So a couple of questions about Greece, which is got a tea controversy. Oh, great. Earl Grey is my second choice. So if I go out for afternoon tea, which I like to take my mother on quite often because she likes afternoon tea, and it's a good excuse to go on afternoon tea, Earl Grey is what we would always have. So for me, it's more of a going out afternoon tea. So tea gates erupting all over the place. So Medal, I hope I pronounced that correctly, planning to cruise on a 19-day Rotterdam cruise departing Piraeus in July. So that's New Rotterdam, very nice. That's New Holland America Rotterdam, which looks a beautiful ship. Departing Piraeus in July 2021. We're both vaccinated US citizens. Is it safe to book? I think the question is, we don't really know if Holland America are going to be starting up. So July 2021, I certainly moved, I had Holland America trips, it was more Northern Europe. I moved that into next year because I'm not sure that Holland America are going to start up in Europe that early and that in the summer. They haven't made any announcements at all. So if you think about all that the Carnival Corporation group have done so far, is they have announced out of Greece with Seabourn, but all the other lines, they are only really doing out of the UK at the moment. So you've got Princess, Cunard, P&O. Holland America haven't done any of the startups. Carnival hasn't done any new porting at all. So it's literally they haven't done any specific porting. So it's not clear. And I did look at where the various Holland America ships were. I can't remember. So I would say personally, I would hold back unless you can get a really low deposit and definitely a refundable deposit, unless you want to travel with Holland America. Because I would say July 2021, Holland America have been incredibly quiet about what their plans for Europe are, almost too quiet. So I would be extremely cautious, and that's my thing. Elaine saying, what is a nomus on a Greek island cruise? Now, there are a couple of absolute must-dos, and I'll do a little punt here. I have a couple of videos around Greek island cruising, which I did in 2019, I think I remember correctly. So, and I do talk about that. So definitely, after this is finished, and you wanted to find out more, if you go to the channel and search for the environment, I can note to myself, I'll post a link. I've lost my pen. Anyway, I'll try and remember. I'll try and post a link to them in the show notes as well. But a couple of absolute must-dos. So, and I think one of the advantages this summer is these places are normally crazy busy, crazy crowded. And so I've tended to go to the Greek islands a little bit out of season to try and miss just the craziness of numbers. But this year, because it's going to be, first of all, fewer, I think, land-based travelers, and certainly international travelers, I guess, and there's going to be much fewer cruises. So absolute must-dos, I would say, make sure you're going to Santorini, which is just magical. That's that classic picture you see near all the white buildings on the hilltop, and it's in a sort of is it a caldera? There's an old volcanic thing. So these beautiful, really sharp, steep mountains. My little tip would be get the little water taxi so that you get your tender to the dock. What I would suggest you do is get one of the taxis that take you, I think it's Ola, I think is the name of the town. So you get a beautiful view. You go to the town there and they will sell you a package where you get the water taxi. It's about 20 minutes, half an hour. And they include a bus that takes you to the main Santorini. But you get to see a little bit more. You get this other very beautiful town, but you also get some incredible views from there. Then you get the bus to Santorini, which is normally ram full. Then either walk down the hill, which is very nice. Don't use the donkeys. I feel very sorry for the donkeys there, and people don't support them. They'll stop doing the donkeys. But it's quite a nice walk down, or you can get the cable car down. The queue for the cable car could be crazy busy. So Santorini is definitely one. Mykonos is another great place to go. Again, it's such an iconic island. It's a very famous island. You've got the beautiful windmills there. Lots of really nice places to eat. Now it depends where they go to, because a lot of them will go to Cyprus. Some of them will go to Crete, which are both really interesting. More kind of beachy stuff. You also want to go to Heraklion or Katakolon. Katakolon is fantastic because you can then head, right to, and my mind's gone completely blank what it's called now. The famous ruins. Why is my mind's gone completely blank? But anyway, at Katakolon, Olympia. Thank you, Olympia. My mind just went. Where the Olympic Games and stuff set up beautiful ruins and stuff. Those would be the absolute must. But have a look at the video, because I do talk about the best islands, but most of them will tend to include some of those. Lalita Loca, great to see you here, Tony. So if for those of you who don't know, I think a lot of you looking at my channel, or people who watch my channel also watch Tony. Tony, multiple times a week posts his view and thoughts on the kind of the news in the US, particularly the CDC. Sometimes he has a good old rant at them, but it keeps you really up to date. So Tony's asking, how does the 1,000 passenger capacity limit work? Does it end on June the 21st, or is in place all summer? Tony, basically the ruling is in place until the 21st of June. So in the UK, we have the different stages of lockdown. So stage 3 is the one that happens in May, when indoor dining opens, for example. Theatres, cinemas open with reduced capacity, which is also actually, interestingly, 1,000 or 50%. So all the theatres in the West End, or many of the theatres, are opening their shows with 50% capacity or 1,000. A few other things open. International travel is no longer illegal. Domestic cruising can start. And you're absolutely right, is the 1,000 passenger capacity or 50%, whichever is lower. It's very important. So if you take Saga, if they were to start sailing before the 21st of June, their ships hold 999 passengers. They would have to sail basically with just under 500 passengers because it's whichever is lower, 50% or 1,000. But right at the moment, what it says in the document is they hope to lift that ruling, because the idea is in that stage is actually things like theatres are going to go back to full opening. Probably mask wearing will maybe become advised rather than required, all that kind of stuff. And they're running lots of tests at the moment. In football stadiums, they're running some concerts with 4,000 people. They're running the Brit Awards, which is like the Grammys, I guess, with a full audience with I think 7,000 people, something like that. So they run lots of tests with scientists and tests and airflow and pre-tests and post-tests. But you're right. So the theory is that after the 21st of June, that will lift. Now, it's also very important, if you look at when most cruise lines are starting sailing, almost all of them are already starting off that date. They've been in discussion with the government all through. So I think they would have known this was happening. So you've only got MSC, which is interesting. When MSC first announced they were selling, they announced up until June they were only selling 1,000. So clearly this was known by it seems this was known by them. So that's how it's going to work. So it's 1,000 or 50%, whichever is the lower. Passengers doesn't include the crew, very important as well. So you could have theoretically on a ship 1,000 crew and 1,000 passengers. So it's not the total capacity of the ship. So I know, like in the US with the CDC, their rules are all ships carrying more than 250 people which is passengers and crew, which is why I guess Victory had a problem in the US trying to start up at one time. So so hopefully that answers the question, Tony. And certainly if you want to keep up to date on what's happening in the US, Tony is the man to do that for you. William, have you ever gone on an American river cruise? Would you recommend one until Americans can travel again? I have not, William. I desperately want to go on an American river cruise. I want to do Mississippi, which looks fantastic, and I also want to do the Great Lakes. Those are the two that I really want to do. And my plan had originally been in the olden days before all this happened and we lost basically kind of 2 years of normal cruising, was I would have done them by now. I really want to cover them. I really just want to come. So no is the answer. Would I recommend them? I would if I was in the US, that's what I would definitely be looking at, partly because I'm really interested in those two. Now I think I'm right in saying that the Great Lake cruises were not operating or can't operate because of course they go into Canada, and there were some issues around the numbers, which I think they may or may not have solved. So I don't know that offhand, so it's worth checking whether those are running, but I know some of them were cancelled because of that limits of the ships going in and not going in. So, but I would definitely do them. I'm going to forgive, so on T-Gate, coming back to T-Gate, where are we? I saw something about T-Gate, and I just lost it, where Lou had said about me looking for it. I'm going to forgive her, but she was lucky enough that she said Earl Grey, because that is my option B. So she squeezes through on that. In fact, I'm going to be on a cruise where we'll have a tee off, if that's a thing. On we're both going to be on the Saga Spirit of Discovery cruise, which is on the 26th of June, I think it is, 26th, 25th of June. She's going to be on there with her parents, so maybe I'll convince her within whatever social distance we're allowed to have, because of course we're on the same thing. But we'll have to have tea outside, I guess, is going to be the rule. So just building on that 1,000 passenger question. So David's saying, how full are cruise ships likely to be allowed to be this year? And David, we don't know, but I'll tell you two things which are interesting. Is what Frank Del Rio, who is the overall CEO of the Norwegian Cruise Line Group, had said is what they're planning to do, both in the letter they wrote to the CDC, which the CDC never replied to or acknowledged when they were asking about starting up in July out of the US, and what they're also doing with the cruises is they're starting in out of Greece and stuff around the world, in Greece and in the Caribbean, is they were going to start with 60% capacity when they start, whatever month they start, and then they were going to increase by 20% every month after that. And I think the idea would be that by the time that sort of rolled out through a couple of months, they'd be back to having the right to go with full capacity. What the UK document says that the government put out is they actually say they are hoping to lift in level 4 all of the restrictions, including limits on domestic cruising. Now, does that mean they're going to let people go to full capacity or not? It's very clear that the cruise lines aren't selling full capacity. We don't know exactly what then. It's been really hard to find out. I have tried, but I'm guessing based on what we're seeing around the world and what's sort of been working around the world is I think we're likely to see that 60, 70, 80% capacity. I think I'm right in saying that Saga have said they're going to be selling up to 80% capacity on their sailings, particularly as they head a little bit later. So I think we'll see in these initial trial cruises, or summer cruises, probably a better way of calling them, I think we're going to see that 70, 80%. I think they're hoping that once they get into October, they'll be able to sail at full capacity. So for example, I've got a cruise at the moment on Cunard, which had one of the rollover cruises from all the cancellations, which is due to go to Norway. And that, of course, I mean, there's still some cabins available for that, but I'm assuming that they're selling full. They haven't blocked stuff off, but we just don't know. And I guess the cruise lines have been a little bit coy on that. So Claire's looking forward to a 5-night staycation. I think we are. Very controversial word, staycation. Of course, as everyone knows, there's ongoing debate in the media about is it a staycation and all that stuff, but we're happy to call it so. Definitely Heather joining as well. Great to see Heather as well. So let's have a look. Here we go. Paul R. Is it best to book Queen Mary 2 transatlantic in advance for the best prices? We want to book for 2023. Now, Paul, I'm guessing that you're talking about doing one of the summer season transatlantic. So I would say booking advance generally, certainly when they launch them, they often have some pretty good deals, which often will be more bundling in things like onboard credit, that kind of stuff. One of the things I would say if you're planning so far in advance is they do have a low season and a high season, and the prices can vary quite significantly. And so one of the things you could have a look at is looking at what the prices are between those two levels. So I would certainly plan quite far ahead. And I think also, particularly because they've lost 2 full transatlantic seasons. So it's a bit like the Alaska thing. They lost last year's transatlantic season, and this year's transatlantic season has also been wiped out because they've cancelled the Queen Mary 2 right through, I think, until October. I can't remember the exact date, but which has basically wiped out the season. So you've got 2 years of transatlantics gone, and these are such an iconic trip. So I would definitely book those in advance. We've had a couple of rollovers, and we're now going in May 2022 around me and my partner's birthday time, which we were trying to do. So we've locked that in, and certainly 2022 when I looked was pretty full. So I would book in advance, and certainly I would look at the various promotions and offers that they have, and they often sometimes have really good deals. Now, I would do that particularly if you want to do it. The other thing that we've tended to do on a couple of transatlantics is we have left them very late, but that's more the out of season ones. So it's more the kind of the winter crossings. They do crossings at winter, so you have to be very confident that you like rough seas. It's not always necessarily going to be rough, but it's like almost guaranteed it's going to be rough, and it can be very rough. Now, Queen Mary 2 is pretty stable, so it's not horrifically bad, but we've often left that really late, and then we've got amazing deals much closer to the time. But I think if you want to do someone, I would definitely book it there. John is saying, if these folks are already vaccinated, why are they worried if booking a cruise would be safe? Only in regards to company rules and regulations, I guess, or the ports of call, maybe. I might have missed a comment a little bit further up on that. I think in the discussion, I guess people are more concerned. The stuff that I've seen in the discussions I've seen on the channel, obviously this group of people are very anti-vaccine, but setting that one side, is people who are vaccinated have been more interested in making sure the cruises are traveling with vaccinated passengers and crew to really minimize the risk of any issues. And I think the reason people are concerned is that because it's been such a long time since this cruising, and the risk of anything going wrong is going to create all sorts of problems. And they're also worried, I think, that if something happens, if there's some sort of outbreak, that the authorities will almost overcompensate. And I think in people's minds is what happened at the beginning of the outbreak, when cruise lines were battling to even get ships allowed to dock somewhere. Now, the good news, of course, is all of these cruises are being done very closely with the governments, with the health authorities. There's plans in place. It's often in the same domestic health system. So I think it's much more around that area. Is people just want to be overcautious. As you head back out with 1,000 people want to be really cautious. So, for example, in the UK, using a similar analogy, is all of the major cultural institutions, so the theatres, for example, the big sports authorities, the festivals, they have all been advocating and supporting the idea of having this certificate where you can either have a recent negative test of vaccine or showing that you have the antibodies, so they can run full. So you can have, Andrew Webber wants to open his new musical Cinderella, and he wants to have, I think it's 1,200 people at every showing. And they're saying, we've got to give also people confidence to be back out mixing with people after being told for so long not to mix in big crowds. So I think it's an element around that of confidence. That's certainly my take on it. And of course, there is also those encouraging news coming in that even if you're vaccinated, you can still get the virus and you can still pass it on. And of course, vaccines are not 100%. I think, although we've seen in the UK, I think it's only 26 people have ended up in hospital of those who have been vaccinated, and something like 12 million people have been vaccinated. So it's pretty encouraging. It's always nice to see this. I love cruising, and it's been so really nice to absolutely going to be so great to get back out there. I think Putin killed. I want to minimize risk. I think that's one of them, maybe not. Sam Lloyd presents, what are your thoughts on mega cruise ships? I've been on Oasis class and several huge ships. One of the seas looks tempting for next year. I'm personally not a big mega ship fan, but that's more in terms of what I'm looking for out of cruising. So I think what those mega ships do, the Wonder, the Seas, Oasis Sea, are phenomenal in terms of what they do. Now, it's really interesting that I'm not mad about the ships because I like resorts. I like Vegas and those big kind of resort ships. So I think in terms of what they do are amazing. So, and certainly they are pretty slick at what they do. So I think it's really around what you like. And I would say certainly all of those ones that you're talking about are Royal Caribbean. I think Royal Caribbean do mega ships amazingly. And picking the right itinerary, I think, is also really important, where you can take advantage of that, like the Caribbean and stuff. So I'm less of a fan because I prefer the kind of the smaller ships. Thomas asking again, how long cruise lines will require people to stay with official excursions? Good question. So as you know, most of the cruise lines are requiring you to go on cruise line only excursions. They will require it as long as the ports require it. So it's really driven by the ports on one hand, and of course by the cruise lines. One, because the cruise lines want to keep that kind of bubble they're creating, because obviously they're testing people. And what MSC have been doing on their cruises, which ran last summer, is they're testing both the beginning and sort of the middle to the end, because they had to test. So they want to keep that whole bubble. So a lot of it depends on the individual cruise line keeping the bubble, and also importantly the ports, because the ports are as nervous both from their population's reaction to having cruise line people coming in. Now, what most of the cruise lines have said, so even with these domestic UK cruises, which towards the end start to include some ports of call, is that they're hoping that by that September, end of August, September time, that will be the time that it's allowed. So I think we will see it more towards the end of the season. But you're right, I think many of those operating even in the Greek islands are having a cruise line excursion. So very important to check. So I think it's going to be certainly early on, and I think as we head out towards the summer, as that vaccination rolls out, I think we're going to see something else. World Traveler, we are seniors and have enjoyed a few Holland America cruises. Want to try a similar or better class of cruising with another line? Would Celebrity be a good choice for Mediterranean cruises? Absolutely. I think there's a couple of cruise lines which are very, very similar. You've got Holland America, Princess, Cunard, Celebrity, and probably to a lesser degree Pinot. They've tried to become a little bit more family orientated, and in terms of their overall broad experience, they're very, very similar. I would say if you're looking for a slightly more contemporary kind of take on things, Celebrity is a good one to look at. If you like specialty dining, for example, take a look at Celebrity Cruises, because what Celebrity do is they have a lot more specialty dining options than you would have on Holland America, for example. If you go on some of the newer ships like the Edge and the Apex, it's even a little bit more edgy. So a good transition maybe, in my view, from Holland America would be onto one of the Solstice class ships. So like, you've got Celebrity, Solstice, Millennium, blah, blah, all those, that sort of class of ships that are a little bit more familiar, I guess, than the Edge and the Apex. I like Holland America. I love Holland America. I love the Music Walk. I really like Princess, and I really like Celebrity. And I do see them a little bit as interchangeable, but they do have a slightly different vibe. Celebrity would argue that they're pushing for a much more youthful crowd, both in mindset and in age. In my experience, it's been relatively similar. I would say if you go, if you go in the peak holiday season, you're going to have probably more kids than you're used to on Holland America. But certainly, they have beautiful cabins, beautiful food, good service. I would definitely give Celebrity a go. I really like Celebrity, and I really like Holland America. So I do see them as kind of really equals between, not equals. If you like Holland America, you like Celebrity for slightly different. They offer something slightly different, but the same. If you know what I mean, it's familiar, but the same. Victoria, I'm not sure I can entirely answer this. I'm traveling from Belfast to London with EasyJet. They're getting a flight from Gatwick the next day to Jamaica with TUI. We'll only need 2 different COVID tests. I've had my vaccination. So my understanding is that you need to double check, obviously, with Jamaica. My understanding at the moment, with the rules of Jamaica, you have to have a COVID test within 3 days to 24 hours. So if you're doing it all through, it's fine. Coming back, you need to check, because obviously each country has slightly different rules. So clearly Northern Ireland at the moment has slightly different rules to Scotland, which has slightly different rules to England, which has slightly different rules to Wales. Hopefully they're going to come together and have more, consistency around things like quarantining, red list, etc. But you should find they're all pretty more. Good point. I want to make one last point on celebrity. Very good point. Celebrity, you will find celebrity notably more expensive than Holland America on the surface, because they now have their bundled packs where they include drinks package, Wi-Fi. But Holland America have also launched a similar thing where you pay to get a similar bundle to Celebrity. But unlike Celebrity, where it's your only option, on Holland America you can take the base fare, or you can take the fare with the similar things. So they've always priced the same. So if you want a lower base fare, that's going to be one of the key difference. Wow, an hour has already gone by. It's gone by really quickly. Again, so many fantastic questions. I will, as usual, take a look at the questions that I haven't answered in them. I'll try and answer them during the week, or pick them up at the beginning next time as well. A little punt, of course, don't forget that on a Sunday, every Thursday and Sunday, I have a new video out. Coming, Splash or Cash. That's a little teaser what that's going to be. Find out tomorrow at 6 o'clock UK time when it goes live. So really appreciate you joining me. Hope you have a great rest of the weekend. If you are able to book a cruise, go and book a cruise anyway. I've run out of time to book cruises, so I'm now looking at 2022. So thanks very much. Take care, and don't forget to watch my video tomorrow at 6 o'clock UK time. Thanks for joining.